Led by a lifelong interest in healing, Dr. Linda Salvin pursued an advanced degree in epidemiology. Then, after dramatic near-death experiences, Dr. Linda saw the other side and returned with gifts of insight, visions, and revealed wisdom. Now those gifts are ongoing, and she's here to share them with you. Get ready to be amazed. It's time for Dr. Linda Salvin's Psychic Solutions podcast with America's original radio psychic, Dr. Linda Salvin, offering up her always fascinating blend of psychic psychology, clairvoyant insights, and expert guests and alternative healing methods. So pull up a chair and get ready for a visit with the one and only Dr. Linda. And now, live from Los Angeles, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Linda Salvin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Linda. Welcome back. Today's going to be an amazing show. Most of them are anyway, but this is going to be different because a friend of mine who lives in Israel and has since, 1974, I believe, after we got out of high school, his name is Moshe Chertoff. I met him in fourth grade. Okay, that was the year that President Kennedy was shot. We're going to talk about our history, but most of all, what we're going to talk about is what he has done, experienced, what he's involved with now in the Israeli situation. Let's bring him on. I don't even want to start explaining who he is. Moshe, hello. Welcome to my show. I know it's been a kind of a long day for you because how many hours ahead are you? 8 or 9 in Israel?
10 hours.
Oh, you're 10. Maybe that's where I got the numbers wrong. I'm so sorry. So thank you for.
That's all right. It's 10 in the evening here. Hi to everybody. Good day in the United States. Good evening from Israel and the area.
I'm thrilled to have you on. I have watched you for years online, and no, we haven't really talked since probably high school, junior high. I don't remember, but I do remember.
How many years ago?
No, we kind of aged a little bit since we were children. But, when we were chit-chatting about coming on the show, you brought back that you remember going out on the playground when Kennedy was shot, and I was in your class with Mrs. Streeter. Let's talk about that for a moment because it all relates to war. It all relates to unrest. It all relates to murder. It all relates to assassinations. I mean, the world has changed digitally, emotionally, and nothing's changed. We progress, but we don't. We do, but we don't. Fourth grade, was that the year you came to the school?
I came in third grade when they closed down my previous elementary.
And I got there in A3. Back in those days, they would split the levels A3, B3, depending on which 6-month period you were born in. And I had skipped second grade because we left LA, went to Vegas, came back. And then I don't know if we were in that one class, but I know Mrs. Streeter. And right. I remember in 1962, we were in bungalows, and the neighboring teacher, Mr. Bunyan, opened the door, and we all looked up, and he ran over to the teacher. She broke into tears, and then all of a sudden, I think the bells went off.
That's right, fire drill.
The fire drill bells.
Yeah, everybody goes out to the playground.
And we went out to the playground, and then we were told President Kennedy had been shot.
Right.
And I remember, you probably remember your thought, but I remember thinking, I don't feel safe anymore. And look what's happened since. What was your first thought? Do you remember how you felt when that was announced?
It's interesting. Today, I'm still a political activist, but
you are.
I had already supported Kennedy in his election campaign.
You knew as a child.
Excuse me?
You knew as a child that was your thing.
Yeah. But I don't remember being terribly shocked or crying or very aware of it. It was kind of a fuzzy thing, which is like, what's going on here?
Shock.
What are they talking about? I guess it was shock, but I'm not entirely sure that I understood exactly what was going on. I don't know.
Well, we were young. We were, 10?
Exactly.
It's not like we're supposed to know everything. Even in our 70s, we don't know everything.
Right. And it's not like someone sat down next to us and said, listen, something's happened. I got to talk to you.
It was like huge.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so they're talking out loud on a playground with the cars going by and whatever. I'm sure most of the American public had pretty much stopped at that time and went to watch TV and whatever, Walter Cronkite, etc. But I don't remember it that much.
No, they sent us home. They sent us home from school. I walked home. It was 4 doors down from the school. and my mom was in front of the TV crying.
Yeah.
And I started to understand more that Kennedy was gone. You know, it's what's happened since, whether it's theory, whether it's conspiracy, whether Lyndon Johnson was behind it, whether it was the mafia, whether it was CIA. Somebody wanted him out because he knew too much of the truth. It always seems that the people...
Or for another reason that we don't know. Who knows?
We don't know. It could have been because he knew UFOs were real, or he knew that something was happening. It was the Cuban crisis back then.
Who knows?
Who knows? But that whole family, as we know, has been a target for death.
Yeah. And now that you mention it, I never realized until just now that even when Robert Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles, which
was at the Ambassador Hotel, we were in high school in, was it 68, 69?
67.
No, it was later. I think it was 69. 68 or 69. It was later than that. I can Google it.
Okay.
But what's the train of thought there about Robert Kennedy?
The fact is that even then when I watched it and I watched his, I was watching all of these things happening, and we're watching real violence live on television that never happened before. We never really watched. We didn't see the assassination. What we saw was people rushing into the back, and I wasn't crying. And then the next day or two later, we watched a real murder on live when what was his
Kennedy.
name?
Ruby.
When Ruby came in, and we're watching him pull a gun and shoot.
It was at the Ambassador Hotel, and I just looked at it. June 6, 1968 is when Kennedy died. So
Harvey Oswald was when John Kennedy was shot.
Correct. So between the two brothers, and now we've got our Kennedy Jr. running.
Yeah. Welcome to the new world of, hey, it's on, and you may not have known that this is going to happen, but you're watching.
We were watching it back then, and we've evolved. And then we had Martin Luther King, and then we had, between John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Luther King, and then that whole era that we went through in the 60s. We grew up with that.
The string.
Go on.
The string that I find that ties in all of the things that we've mentioned until now, and including what's happening just a couple miles from me in Lebanon and around
That's what I want to hear about.
It's violence. And violence usually comes from hatred. And hatred usually comes from misunderstanding or not understanding why someone should be angry at you or why you should be angry at them. And all of these things get cooked in an oven of everybody pushing you on. And you hear things in the back saying, this guy's horrible, or these people are terrible, or whatever. And the hatred and the
it just comes.
Yeah.
It
all boils up.
I will bring this up now, and I know you're watching and you're close to the Lebanese border, and
10 miles.
Can you hear the missiles? I mean, you probably hear everything happening, the bombs.
There was one evening where I had 5 times while I was trying to do something, I heard 5 large explosions. On the other hand, they could have been artillery of ours firing back at someone who was firing missiles onto the Lebanese border. I do remember standing on my porch. You see the steps behind me up on top, we have a porch, and I actually saw the Iron Dome missiles being launched at incoming missiles from Lebanon. And it's like you're standing in quiet, and all of a sudden, like a jet just flies right above you. Whoosh! And then you see it go up in the sky.
I don't know how you do it. You left LA, after high school? We graduated 71. You went to kibbutz in 74?
I went to Israel in 71 to 72, came back to LA to work in a youth movement where most of my friends still are from. And those of us from that youth movement eventually came to live in Israel in 73, 74. I arrived in December 74, and I went into the army in March of 76.
How was that for you? I mean, you don't do that here, but you did it there. And I know it's required in Israel. I understand.
Yeah, it was required, but it was an interesting process because there I was an opponent of the war in Vietnam and wouldn't have wanted to go and fight a war on the other side of the world.
But you were okay in Israel.
The other side of the world, and ended up in, but it was very strange. I was older than most of the guys giving me orders because, you know, I was already 21 and they were 18, 19-year-olds. And it was, as long as you look at it as kind of a game in terms of the training and everything, so you can get along. You have to kind of laugh. They're telling you to run around buildings, go from here to there. And it's kind of like camp. But then,
like camp, the big Jewish camp of soldiers. Go on.
Well, not just Jews. There's also Druze and Christians.
Oh,
and,
really? I didn't know. I thought it was always just Israeli. Okay.
No, Israeli, yeah, but not necessarily.
But not necessarily Jewish. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
21% of Israelis are not Jewish. So
That's
anyway,
true.
I
was supposed to go to kibbutz in 71. It never happened. I still haven't been there, but go on. If I get there, I'll let you know.
Come on over. I have room right up there, right above.
I may be in Dubai in December. I was going to go on to Cairo. If I'm up for some awards, and like I said, if that happens, maybe I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Whatever.
But let's go back to you. This isn't about me. It's about you.
Myself, standing on the border, right? What I was talking about, 10 miles away, and watching missiles being fired back in the 1970s. Missiles being fired into the city just north of us. That's called Nahariya. It's the most northern city along the Mediterranean. And yeah, I remember watching it, and I remember saying, you know, this is ridiculous. We can't fire back at them until we have permission. By the time permission arrives, they're gone. There's nobody you're going to hit. There's nobody going to kill. So anyway, you fire a missile at the place, and there's nobody there. And okay, we've done ours, and then we move on. And it keeps on happening and happening and happening.
But why?
Why? Okay.
It's so stupid because it's the constant war, the constant fight for land, right? It's all about the land.
It's about people and land, not just land. It's people and land. So this is a brief history of why we're at where we're at. Okay. I apologize to anybody who thinks I've simplified it too much. You're right. But this is to be able to.
That's why you're here today, because I know and I mean, you've got a CV 2 pages long, and we could take 5 hours just to talk about your background. You're so knowledgeable, and you're on the front line. You're there. Besides the people, I'm sure you lost people in October, the murders, the deaths, the rapes, the unconscionable actions. So
let's go back and fill in the why it's happened, what that part of history brought us to today.
Please.
So the Jewish people came, starting with Abraham back in Mesopotamia. He came to the land of Israel, which wasn't yet known as the land of Israel, and he is buried in Hebron. And there is a split between the peoples of Abraham, and there are the people who became the Arabs and eventually Muslims, Christians, etc. And there are those who were the Jewish people. And story tells it, and if you believe this, that's part of your religion, that's fine. I jump over that part because it's less relevant to me. We were supposedly the chosen people, chosen by God to as his people. And therefore, we also have the land is ours, so to speak. Now, be that as it may, if you believe it or not, we were here until we went through many periods in which we had our temple in Jerusalem. It was destroyed one time, and then it was destroyed a second time by the Romans. And then we either dispersed or were dispersed. There's various theories and whatever throughout the regional world, not the entire world. There was nobody going to the Americas yet or anywhere, really far, but throughout the entire Middle East, North Africa, whatever. And we still had Jews living in Israel, but there were very few. Now, time goes on, and you have all of the different empires passing through here, because this happens to be the shortest route if you want to quickly get somewhere. So you don't go by land, you go by ship through the Mediterranean to the far eastern edge of the Mediterranean, and that's this land, either known as Palestine or Israel or whatever you want to call it. And then from there, you get on caravans and go cross land to the Arabian Peninsula and the Arabian Sea or the Persian Sea, and you get into a boat, and then you can continue going from there. In any case, many armies and empires came through here. The last empire to rule here was the Turkish Empire, which took sides with Germany in World War I, and they ruled this entire region, including North Africa and through much of Eastern Europe and further east. And then they lost the war, the Second World War. The British then took what was called the British Mandate, which included what is today's Israel and Jordan, then called Transjordan. That was under the British mandate, as they call it. And there was a French mandate that included Lebanon and Syria. So up until today, the language, all the old folks, that's right, all the people who were way back from this area spoke English. All the people from north of us spoke French. That's the second language of the people. Anyway, along comes,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, along comes what's called the Zionist movement. There was Theodor Herzl, and there were all sorts of people who thought about, look, this was our homeland. We have to go back there. We have to have a land of our own.
Stop a moment, please, Moshe. Yes. A lot of people, myself included, and my sister's a Zionist, and Wendy, who we grew up with, I think is in Israel now. Right. I don't know if you see her or here or whatever, but the Zionist is actually a positive aspect of the Jewish population. It's not, I mean, it's more radical, it's more political, correct?
It's the national movement of the Jewish people. That's the general framework of what Zionism is. There are now many different types of Zionism.
Right. And but we're still positive. We're not harming anybody. We're in favor of getting rid of anti-Semitism. This is where I get confused, and I need you to help.
It gets sticky.
Yeah, help me, because the listener's going to want, I need to know, because I get confused when, no, I'm not a Zionist, I'm this, I'm that, or my sister's this, or my friends that. Help us understand what you know.
All right, so let's look at it from the viewpoint of the people who were living here until Zionists came into this land and started to desire and develop a desire to develop a Jewish homeland. Because throughout the 2,000 years that we weren't here, we were subject to pogroms and horrific anti-Semitism in various different places. And then we had the big one, the Holocaust.
Right.
And now the British are still ruling during the time of the Holocaust. But the people who lived here, the Arabs who had lived here for hundreds of years, I mean, I've got a village right across the fields from here in the Western Galilee, where the families have in their cemetery people from 800 years ago, the same family. So it's not like they haven't been living here and someone made it up that they actually just came here and then decided to call. It doesn't matter if they actually call themselves Palestinians or Arabs or whatever. All of these categories eventually came into being. The point was that all of a sudden you've got these people coming from Europe and from all sorts of places around the world, and they want to create their homeland here. And you're saying, your homeland? Well, wait a second. We've been living here for all this time and now it's your homeland? How does that work? And then there are the people who actually paid to buy plots of land from them, which, you know, if you want to sell your land and you get a whole bunch of money, sounds like a good deal. On the other hand, there are people who just came in and didn't bother buying it. There were various types of Zionists. So if we remember that Zionism is actually just the movement for creating a homeland for the Jewish people, because there is no other. There are many Christian countries around the world. There are Buddhist and Hindu countries and all sorts of countries representing religions. But here it also gets messy because Jews are not just a religion.
It's a culture.
Since the last 200 years, since the mechanical revolution, and Jews began to study. Jews were always studying, by the way. Jews had to, as a part of our religion, we had to be able to read and write. And part of our religion is also to question, and therefore to argue with one another about what did he mean in this passage of the Torah, of the Bible. Wait, what did he mean here? I'm not sure, this conflict. And that's why you have these constant discussions. And the joke throughout the years that we say, it's not anti-Semitic. We say if you have two Jews, you usually have three opinions. And it's because we always question things. We do. Yeah. I think it's a very healthy part of our existence is to question. And therefore, we started taking various directions in Zionism. There are those that were the political Zionists, they're the socialists, they're the all sorts. And what happened was eventually after the Holocaust, you have people who need a homeland, somewhere to come after their entire families were murdered.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about my kibbutz. By the way, kibbutz, very simply, quickly, and I'm sorry to put this into the history, but
no, I want you to do this.
My kibbutz is a communal farm where it's not communism, but we do everything. And until the year 2000, I didn't have a bank account. I didn't really own anything that I had here. It all belonged to the kibbutz or the commune. And it's not like a hippie commune where we all ran around naked or whatever. Maybe they did back then before I came, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, the idea was that in grouping together, we have a much better chance of actually surviving, because it was a rough survival at the time. No matter what, it was not simple. This was mostly desert. And if it wasn't desert, it was swamps of whatever. It was not an easy existence here. Now, when you have a huge field and you take, let's say, 10 families, and the families divide that field into 10, you're going to need 10 different tractors, 10 different irrigation systems, 10 different whatever, as opposed to having one. Now, the guy who goes out and he does the tractor work, or the lady, this is an egalitarian system. There were women who worked in agriculture and did everything just like guys.
Well, the women joined the army too. It's not just for the men. The women are in the army there, just like they are here today. Yeah.
They're drafted. They're not just joining. Anyway, the whole idea of this kibbutz was to be able to bring ourselves together to be stronger as a unit. And so anyway, the people, why did I mention this? Because the people who founded my kibbutz were almost entirely, like it was 90% were Holocaust survivors. Many of them had nobody left. Some of them saw their entire families murdered in front of their eyes.
Let me just interrupt. I grew up, of course, with the stories, and my mom's mom, my grandmother from my mom's side, when my grandmother came to the United States, my grandfather had gone after her. It turned out they were first cousins. And he and his father, who was a famous rabbi in Cleveland and Detroit, went back to Poland to get my grandmother because he was in love. And then they got married. But it was only like not even months had gone by. 11 of the brothers and sisters, the parents, all the cousins were perished in the camps. Yep. I mean, how my grandmother got out, I'm getting chills as I say it. How the timing, and then of course they got married, and then they had 3 kids, and one's my mom, and she was firstborn American, and all we heard growing up was about the Holocaust, but my grandmother would never talk about it. Right. She was never, and a lot of that generation will not
tell their stories.
They won't tell it. Well, she's gone now, but she wouldn't talk. So I grew up with a very quiet, inquisitive, what the mystery is. And then on top of it, my grandfather, 1956, so I was about 2.5, committed suicide. So there was nothing but depression and heavy and dark.
I don't think many people, luckily, can imagine the trauma that these people went through.
Marsha, I was in D.C. back in December, and I went to the Holocaust Museum, and I've seen the pictures, and every time I see them, I think, I wonder if some of those were my relatives. We don't know. But I couldn't stand the museum. I had to get out. It's so painful and so deep. Yeah. Even at Anne Frank's house, which I went to in Holland, I've gone through this. No, I don't think anybody in their right mind can understand what we've witnessed as they're in the striped uniforms and the skeletal bodies.
Right. I knew very little of the Holocaust, and I wasn't taught.
We were sheltered from it growing up in many ways.
You have a family which had a lot of people who died. You couldn't get away from that topic. But my family, I didn't know, had people who perished. It was only later on in 1998 when I started doing research.
Oh, you found out?
I found out that we did have family that died, and I found out all sorts of stuff. But anyway, let's.
Yeah, it's heavy, but people need to know, because today's day and age, they're trying to deny it. There's deniers.
Oh yeah, okay.
There's always going to be that.
But there's also Jewish deniers of Palestinian existence as a people.
Well, Golda Meir, when I saw the last movie, Golda was in some interview on the news. I forget who was interviewing her. She had a Palestinian passport. They were considered Palestinians. All of this bull. She grew up in Ukraine, and then her dad would always close the curtains at Christmas just so they wouldn't show they were Jewish. And then how they got to the Palestinian area, and then it became the Israeli, but her passport. And she said, and that was back in the 70s, she talked like that.
Yeah.
But we're still fighting the same schmutz.
Okay, so let's look back and understand that since the Jews started to arrive, the first Zionists, there's a problem here. There was a struggle for, wait a second, why are you taking control here? What right do you have to come in and try to control our country? Or what? It wasn't really a country at the time. It was just a region. The British ruled their mandate. And before that, the Ottomans, the Turks, ruled the area. But now you've got this struggle coming in. So what you had almost from the very beginning was a kind of a contest to prove who was the most victim of it all. No, we're victims. No, you're taking our land. It's our victims. No, but we have no land. They killed half of our people. In the Holocaust, for anybody who doesn't know, half of the Jewish people were executed. Let's get that straight. Almost all of European Jewry was massacred. So we in the United States, we did okay. And I don't remember much anti-Semitism in Los Angeles as being a kid or anywhere else. But anyway, we'll go back to that. By the way, if you want to talk about that, what got me interested in all of this was a project that I eventually did research for called Missing Identity of Holocaust Survivor Children. They were kids when they went through the Holocaust, and they don't know more than their own private names. They don't know who their parents were, where they lived, when their birthday was. Nothing.
So many of them were taken away for safety, or some were still in the camps. They survived. No, they're right.
No. These are almost entirely people who were put by their parents with somebody else. And give them money. We'll be back. We're going to take a vacation. We'll be back in a month or two. Take care of whatever. What's his name? This is his name. What's his last name? Don't bother. That's his name. Why did they do that? Because they didn't want to get the person who'd taken the Jews and were protecting them in trouble in case the Nazis came. So they didn't tell them the Jewish name. Anyway, there's a whole separate story.
Yeah, but can you imagine living like that?
Excuse me?
I said, can you imagine living like that? Look at the unrest that's going on in the campuses.
I not only can imagine, I've given some of these people their identities, and they now know who they actually are, who their parents were, who of their family either survived or didn't survive. Wow. They've never been able to ask for reparations from the Germans because they didn't know who to ask for. They didn't know what they had. Anyway, that's a whole other story. Well, let's go back to where we were in the history, and then we'll have a better idea of where we are today. So you've got this conflict going on almost from the very beginning about whose land it is, and all that kind of stuff. It eventually comes down to this. The British at the time realized they have a problem. They got two peoples here who don't want to get along entirely. There are those that get along well. There are those that are great friends and whatever, but their leaders, this is generally where it gets bogged up, is the leaders say, no, don't do any dealings with the Jews, because if you do any dealings, if you sell them your land, you will be considered a traitor, etc. And then the Jews come and say, don't ever do anything with the Arabs living here because this and that. So you have a conflict building, and what happens is the British left India, right? And then they started realizing this empire stuff isn't working out too well. Maybe we should reconsider this. So how about if we end our mandate? We'll leave at this date. And they got up and left us to our own. And you've got the Arab countries supporting the Arabs living here. You've got Americans and Jews from around the world helping the Jews. And that's pretty much where the modern conflict started. And then came the decision of the United Nations to partition this land previously called Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. One called Israel and one called Palestine. Now, it wasn't a square on top of another square or something like that. There was an area, for instance, the area that I'm living in was originally supposed to be part of the Palestinian state. And
you're north, right? You're north.
I'm in the north. Everything north of the old city of Akko, which is about 3 miles to the south, which is a city of over 4,000 years old, and all the way up to the Lebanese border, and for about 4 miles wide, the strip in the Western Galilee it was supposed to be part of Palestine, and there were other areas that were supposed to be part of Palestine. The Jews of the time accepted this partition plan, as they called it, and they were ready to start having two states and moving on. The Palestinian leadership, mainly the main Muslim leader, who eventually took sides with Hitler in the Second World War, and he left, he went into exile. He said, don't do that. No, we're not accepting that. So what you had was a war broke out. And when Israel declared its independence because the British left, then the Palestinians said, no. The Arabs in the area, not just the Palestinians. The Iraqis attacked, the Jordanians attacked, the Egyptians attacked, and they took over parts of what is Israel today. And then the Israelis of the time, the first Israelis, fought back and made what are now the modern borders of Israel. And those were accepted from 1949 until 1967. This kind of, it looks like a little wide thing at the top, and then comes down and gets very, very narrow, and then gets wider at the bottom where Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are, and then goes into a triangle down to the bottom. This narrow part is, I think, about only 10 miles wide. A whole country that's nice and long, but has a narrow part of only 10 miles.
A little dot on the map when you look at all the. I know, it's ridiculous.
Even if you do a zoom on that little dot, can you imagine what it's like thinking, now, wait a second, we just came out of a Holocaust, and we've got a country, but it's only 10 miles wide? I mean, if we sneeze, they can walk in and finish this. I mean, we can't live like this. And there were a lot of people who I call it justified paranoia. Half of your people have been slaughtered, and now you're living in a country which is, connected by this little strip of land. So anyway, that was semi-relevant. Then came the 6-Day War. 6-Day War.
In 73.
67.
67. I'm thinking of the next day in 73. Yeah,
you
sorry.
Have too many wars to count. You won't know your wars without a scorecard. So in 1967, the Egyptians, Syrians, and Jordanians attacked Israel. Again, they're still at odds with us because they didn't want to do this thing of letting us take over parts of their land or whatever. And within 6 days, the Israelis had defeated all three armies. Now, it's called the 6-Day War, but you won't hear this from most people. I'm among the only people who will contend that the 6-Day War never ended. We're still fighting it today. And why is that?
That's interesting.
Because that was the first time that we conquered territory beyond what the world had recognized as our official borders.
That's a real interesting point. That's
right.
Interesting. Go on.
We have the Golan Heights, which was conquered, which includes Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in what area that is controlled by Israel, the Golan Heights. We have the West Bank, which used to belong to Jordan. The Golan Heights belong to Syria. The West Bank belonged to Jordan. That's where around Jerusalem is the entire West Bank and all the way to the Jordan River. And then you have Gaza. Now, that used to belong to Egypt. These three territories were taken in 1967. And the main planners of this war realized that what they're going to do is they're going to take territory and then bargain to give it back for peace. We'll give you your territory back, but you got to accept us. You got to let us live here in peace and quiet, and we'll get along well. It may not be immediate, but we're going to get along together. We won't attack you. You won't attack us.
So a lot of the times, the society of people just want to get along and not get in each other's way and be neighborly and be in communities. But then
I'll tell you a secret. It's usually that's the case.
So then it's the government, the politics, the money. Where does all this bullshit come from where we can't live together?
Here's where politics comes in, and there will be people who will agree with me politically and people who will oppose me politically.
Of course. But I trust you.
Separate directions here, and I have a theory.
Thinking about running for office?
I've been told I should, yes.
I think you should.
Well, we'll get along. We'll see. My wife is sleeping. Good, she didn't hear you say that. She doesn't like that idea.
No, okay, she'd be afraid you'd be killed.
No, I'll just be busy all the time. No, that's
that too. That too.
Anyway, what happened was we're going to negotiate giving this back, but in the meantime, all of these Palestinians, which weren't really called quite Palestinians then, these Jordanians would come across and work in our fields and work in our factories for peanuts. And what are they complaining about? They're getting peanuts, which is 10 times the amount that they were getting before then. And look, they're building new houses. And so we kind of convinced ourselves of, look, what do they have to disagree with, be angry about? They're doing fine. What's the big deal? Let's keep it. There's where the problem begins. That's what is now called occupied territory.
Okay.
According to international law, you're allowed to conquer other territory. But once you do, you have total responsibility for all of the civilian needs of everybody and anybody who's in that area that you've conquered. All of their medical, their civil, everything. So that you have total responsibility. Time has gone by in a kind of a quick trick in the Knesset. they passed a law to say, you know what, Golan Heights, we're keeping it. We have annexed it. And in the Knesset, it was accepted, and everybody else in the world said, what? You what? You can't do that. That's illegal, according to international law. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to give it back to the Syrians who, we know who ruled Syria, and we're thinking they're sitting right on top of the Sea of Galilee, which is our only water reservoir for the country. And we're going to let them sit there? No, we're going to keep that in the meantime. If they want to talk to us, they know our phone number. We'll talk about it sometime. That's the only area that has ever been annexed into Israel. We actually had the entire Sinai. We conquered the entire Sinai and Gaza. Sinai itself, the Sinai Peninsula, is like 3 times the size of the state of Israel. And we kept it in the meantime because we used it for military training, and it allowed us access to seaports and whatever. We actually controlled the Red Sea outlet from Israel, where in the south it's Eilat and you have the Red Sea going down. But then at the end, there's this strait, and the Egyptians used to rule that strait. If they didn't want your ships to go through, they didn't go through. Does that sound familiar? That's happening now.
Yeah.
Now it's not the Egyptians, because we made peace with them, but it is the Yemenites called the Houthi, and they don't want anybody to come through there that's coming to Israel or going from Israel. So they took over ships. Okay, going back, we had the Sinai Peninsula, huge, big desert, tremendous mountains. Mount Sinai is where Moses supposedly received the
10 Commandments.
The commandments, the 10 Commandments. Now, I've been to the top of Mount Sinai, far out, amazing place.
I'm going to have to get there. You'll be my tour guide. I'll get there. I'll get there. Go on.
Anyway, so we had this war in 67. Now we've got this area of Jordan.
We were in 8th grade.
What, in 67? Yes, that's right. That was the first war we started watching on TV. It wasn't live, but we saw a lot of war. It wasn't those movies that we used to see of World War II. It was television.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so time goes on. And of course, nobody likes us now that we've conquered territory. They're thinking, what right do you have to do that? According to international law, you're not allowed to, you're like I said, you have responsibility to all of the civilians. You're also not allowed to build any of your own settlements or encourage anyone to go and live in those conquered territories until it's all taken care of. Either you have a vote of everybody there and they all decide they want to become part of your country, or if you don't do that or they decide against that, you don't have any right to just start settling in that area. It's against international law. That's why they call the settlements illegal settlements. It's not a matter of us being the bad guys and them being it's really illegal in terms of international law.
Gotcha.
So, okay, that happens. And most people have never really realized until now, most Israelis at least have never realized until now, there is no such thing as a benevolent occupation. Would you like the United States to be taken over by China? And they'll give you some rights here and there. They'll make sure you have food once in a while.
No, but I may be heading that way, but we do so much. We could do 5 more shows of this. We've got about 15 minutes left. You're halfway through where I want. Yeah, I know it's going fast.
Okay, I'll finish this history really quick.
Yeah, because then I want to ask some questions about what's going on the campuses and all this unrest between.
So what brought us to now is that the occupation and Jordan said, no longer, we don't have anything to do with it. It's we don't care who takes it. We're out of here. And so now you've got these 2 million people living in territory with nobody being the boss. They don't have a passport. They don't have any rights to vote for anything. And people
was there social unrest at that time, or was it?
Of course, it's always been social unrest. That's why Hamas was formed, and that's why it's not a matter of they just hate Jews. I mean, it's a horrible situation, and Israel's in a horrible situation. Why are people who have nothing to do with that in Tel Aviv being bombed? Well, that's part of the entire situation. You take the package. If you don't like it, so get rid of it. But anyway, let's forget that. 1973, we have the Yom Kippur War.
That's what I got confused with. Yeah, right.
Eventually, what comes of that is that Anwar Sadat succeeded in convincing the Egyptians that they won the war. Now's the time to make peace. In essence, I've made it really short. We negotiated, Menachem Begin, Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat. They made peace. We gave back the entire Sinai.
Yeah, they did, and Golda was part of that whole thing was starting to happen, and then
and we haven't had a war with Egypt since. So it works. That was the biggest army in the Middle East, and we have peace with them. Anyway, time has gone by and things keep every once in a while boiling over. And here we are today with new organizations that are pure hatred organizations. There are people in Israel who are also pure hatred. Let's not get,
I can imagine.
We have extremists on both sides. And the
It's-
extremists are the ones leading us through this hell.
Well, interestingly enough, I was supposed to be in Washington, D.C. on October 7th, and I was going to meet a friend of mine from college that lives with her husband down in Virginia. She was going to meet me in D.C. I said, I got to cancel this trip. This is 2 weeks before, still in September of last year. And I said, something's going to happen. Something's not right. You know, I'm a psychic. We're not going there today. But the day I had canceled the trip, my hotels and everything, and then I hear about the war. I would not have wanted to be in Washington, D.C. that day. I just felt oh my God, here we go. And it hasn't stopped since, any more than Ukraine with Russia. It's just one more. But the people and the rapes and the barbaric treatment and attacks. Now, before we move on, because I want to talk about what's going on the campuses, it's kind of quieting down, not quite, but it's not as bad as it was last month, which is where I'm going to bring David Levy on with you the next broadcast, and we're going to bring us all together from his position, yours, and it's all going to make sense. When the internet first came out, Moshe, in 1996, when we all had PCs, I remember, and you might know this too, if you can think back, I was looking at Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and they had children, 2-year-old toddlers dressed in fatigues, holding a machine gun with the sign that said, I hate Jews. They were brainwashed as children to hate Jews. It's that generation that are now at the campuses. I put this together. These are the same people that were brainwashed at the beginning of the internet, that we saw it. All those pictures are offline now because of censorship and manipulation. But I remember, and then when all this started happening across the country with the campuses, and even in October, I had picked up my father in Brentwood, and we took him out to lunch. He goes, what's all this? I said, Dad, the Palestinians are fighting and protesting and Wilshire Boulevard for blocks with all the flags. It's like, where did it all come from?
Well,
is it programmed? Is it paid for? Is it Soros? All the tents? I mean, it's not just, it didn't just happen.
Soros has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
But what it is the cultivation of hatred that's gone on for years, and it boiled over. I must remind everyone that in Israel, we have two very different categories of Israelis, not Jews, Israelis. Those who are supporting this government, which is what they call further right than right government. Right. It's the most racist, hateful, and anti-democratic elements in Israeli society. And you have the Democratic camp. Now, before October 7th, we had protested. Get these numbers. We protested for 39 straight weeks of having over 200,000 people on the street at least once, and sometimes twice and 3 times a week. The American equivalent of that is having 6 million Americans on the streets for 39 weeks in a row protesting against their own government. And we said, this government will lead us to catastrophe.
And that's what's happening.
That's what happened. But none of us imagined that it would come from across the Gaza border, because we've all been told that it's so protected. We invested billions in the fence and whatever, and they just walked through. So anyway, the point being that we predicted there would be catastrophe, and here it is. And so now, again, we are protesting to get rid of the government and try to take it down. And just last night, we elected a new Labor Party.
A friend of yours. I saw your post. Talk about him for a moment.
Okay, his name is Yair Golan, and he was the deputy chief of staff of the IDF a few years back in 2016. And he caused a huge uproar in the country, because standing there on a Holocaust Memorial Day, he said in a speech called the Processes speech, he said, I'm recognizing processes that are taking place already in Israel that remind me of the processes that were happening in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, in the early years of the 30s.
Well,
In
we're
other
all
words,
starting to see
you're
it.
comparing Israel to
We're all
the
starting to see a repeat of the
right. Well,
Holocaust and the hatred.
they spat at him, they cursed him, they kicked him, they
Of
pissed
course,
on him.
but he was right.
And you go back and you find out everything he's always said, which always pissed people off throughout the years, has been right. Well, time goes by. Finally, comes October 7th, this guy who used to be the head of Homeland Security, he woke up in the morning like most of us did for some reason at 6:30 in the morning. We turn on our TVs, which we don't usually do at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday, which is Shabbat, and we're watching what looks like sort of a horror movie or something totally absurd. We're seeing what looks like a kibbutz. We recognize it, but it looks like people on this kibbutz are being killed by terrorists. But it's not 3 terrorists like we're used to seeing. We're seeing hundreds in a single kibbutz. And all of a sudden he sees that. He immediately puts on his clothes, drives to the south, to the Southern Command, says, I'm here. I used to run this place. What can I do? And they put him to work. Come 12 o'clock in the afternoon, he gets a phone call from his sister. A guy who interviewed you a while ago says his son is down at this music festival, that they're dancing right next to the fence with Gaza, and they're under attack. This kid sent his coordinates. Can anyone help him? He said, I'll be there. Takes his gun.
We have 4 minutes left.
Takes his gun, puts on his helmet, drives down there, and absolute Rambo goes into the killing fields and starts killing terrorists and drags the 3 kids out, puts them in the car, drives them out, goes back, takes more kids. Now all of a sudden he's become a hero of Israel. People no longer piss out on him. They don't spit
because
at
he rescued the kids like they
and
did
he
in
rescued
Germany.
many people. And yesterday he was elected the chairman of the Labor Party, which we will now be creating together a social democratic camp party. And hopefully we're going to take control of the country and start putting it back on track and not to where
Your
it's
mouth to God's ears, Moishe. I mean, I can't imagine. I only see TV. I see YouTube. I talk to friends. One of my clients is Israeli. His mother's in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. I've worked with her. I have friends of mine, one in particular, we're going to do another show within a few weeks, who's very active with anti-Semitism and fighting it. You have stories. You need a book out. You need to have, I know you're online. If people want to reach you, where can they find you? I know you've got YouTube, but what else? Facebook.
I have a Facebook page. The name is as it appears here.
Moishe Chertoff.
It's not Moishe, it's Moshe, the Hebrew pronunciation, not the Yiddish, right? I also did a podcast series of my own called Israel's Slippery Slope. If you want to learn more about what we were protesting about, you can find that on YouTube. Those are probably the 2 best places where you can find me. I'm in lots of places. You can look me up in Google. You'll find that I've been active for many, many years.
Yeah, you have. And I'm thrilled and honored you took the time, especially at this late hour there in Israel, to do this. I will have you go backstage. We'll wrap up in a moment. But people, this has been the last hour of talking to somebody I grew up with in Los Angeles, California. It's a reality check with an Angelino who's in Israel for 60 years, 50 years already. I know it's not pushing, right? Because we're already hitting it. Do you ever come back to the States? Do you ever visit? Do you ever come?
I have, and I feel a foreigner.
It is. Even the valley.
I made to feel like an Israeli in the United States, and I'm made to feel like an American when I'm in Israel. Oh, well.
Yeah. So you're whatever, but you're still you. You've done a fabulous job. I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to put you backstage right now. Again, this is Dr. Linda Salvin thanking. I want to call you Mr. Chertoff, and you've got so much wisdom and your experience, but your passion and your love for all of this. But I think you're going to run for office. I know your wife doesn't want it, but I think something's going to happen in the next 3 years. Next 3 years or less, you're going to get more involved. Take care. I'll see you backstage. I'm Dr. Linda Salvin. This is the end of Psychic Solutions for today. I have new guests coming on for the next couple of shows, as you will see through each lineup. If you want to contact me off the air, that information will be given to you momentarily. I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed Dr. Linda Salvin's Psychic Solutions podcast. You can reach Dr. Linda at 888-509-1077 or at lindasalvin.com. Need a breakthrough of your own? Ready for answers or insights nobody else has? Reserve your own one-on-one in-person chat. Dr. Linda isn't just for other people. Dr. Linda gets results for you. And it's easy. Contact details are on screen now. Just click on lindasalvin.com or call toll-free 888-509-1077. That's lindasalvin.com or toll free at 888-509-1077.